Today we're going to take a $10 budget keyboard and put $100 worth of awesome parts into it, and hopefully we're not going to screw up too badly in the process. The plan for this build is much like any other build. We're going to turn this into something that looks awesome, sounds awesome, and might even be a little bit of fun to make. The very first step in upgrading this keyboard is to see what we even want to do. This time around, I want to venture into a few new techniques that I've been picking up from around the internet, and it's going to go perfectly. This is what we call foreshadowing. We're going to replace the tactile blue Otemu switches with something special I bought from Akko. I want to add as much heft to the case as possible, swap out the keycaps for something nice looking, and I want to spray paint this case to actually look good this time. Maybe. I actually bought primer. Before we strip it down, here's a quick example of how this keyboard sounds straight out of the box. Now let's throw all that away and get to work. The thing that most impressed me about this racing keyboard, and something that quite literally took me by surprise last week, is this darn thing is hot swappable. A $10 legitimate fully mechanical keyboard is a shockingly awesome thing to find. Normally, this would need some real wrenching to get apart, and then we'd have to desolder and resolder everything back together. I think the best approach is to move into the case next, because if I do the painting correctly, or at least as correctly as all the YouTube videos and guides say to, I've got to make a whole lot more passes and drying sessions to get the primer, paint, and clear coat to stick as best as possible. We're going to scuff up this plastic case with some steel wool. Now what this should do is this should break up any invisible coat or protection left over from the factory and will allow our paint to actually hold to the board. You don't think your plastic is coated with anything until you take some steel wool to it. And you can see, here's a comparison between scuffed and unscuffed. Now prepped, we're going to set up a very high quality spray paint containment system comprising of exactly one epic level cardboard box. And yes, if you were curious, trying to paint the top plate is a huge pain in the rear. We're going to do a couple very light and even coats of primer, and we're going to let the board sit for a minute, and let's go on to some other parts. Next up, we might as well get the switches out of the way, and today we're going to use Akko Starfish linear switches. Honestly, I picked these because they look really awesome, and I've never used anything outside of boring standard MX switches. Plus, I'm a sucker for linear switches, so it is what it is. These look so cool. I think the green and the purple look really awesome together. I know you won't see them in daily use, but I'll know they're there. And knowing the keyboard is cool is like 95% of the battle. This is a full-size keyboard, which means, whew, it is time to settle into this session for the long haul. Thank goodness 2-hour video essays on Fallout New Vegas exist. We'll get these all cracked open, lubed, filmed. Did you know that you can tell someone's allegiance in New Vegas by the way they pronounce Caesar? That's fascinating stuff. I hated working on these switches. I'm normally set up to handle MX switches we talked about earlier, so using this slightly different variation means a lot of additional fiddling, and they don't exactly match my normal workflow. We got it done, but it took way longer than normal. Okay, the switches are handled. Let's go back out to the ultimate spray paint station and start the actual painting. Because the way this particular board is laid out with the metal on top of the plastic, we don't have to worry about the edges so much from a consistency standpoint. You do want to take care of edges because they can cause you real problems in the future if the paint wants to start peeling, so we'll make sure we handle it that way, but we don't need to worry so much about the looks. Here's where the foreshadowing just becomes shadowing, because everything goes off the rails here. I wanted to try and be fancy for this video, and I tried my very first attempt at hydro dipping. If you don't know what hydro dipping is, it's where you take a bunch of paint, put it on water, you dip it in so you get this really cool thing. I set up the bin, I filled it with water, I did a test run, I got the paint all situated and started the dip, and for some reason, we got some wicked water bubbles, which it just ruined the whole thing. The rest of it looked fine, and it actually turned out pretty well, but I didn't want big blank spots, so we needed to break out the old orbital sander again to save us from ourselves. And honestly, I was not planning on needing Mr. Orbital Sander so soon after the Dragon Ball Z video. I swear, it is the fancy painting that is my downfall, because it took me 3 times the amount of time to scrape all the old paint off the board, and then we had to reprime it and repaint it, and this time we went back to the two-tone look with a nice light chalk blue for the plate and a deeper blue for the bottom. While this 8th or 9th coat of paint dries, let's get the stabilizers taken care of, and this time they come from the factory without a lick of lube on them. Now you might see this as a problem, but I vastly prefer this over what you can sometimes get where a brand way over lubes the stabilizer and you spend more time taking lube out than anything else. And this was the simplest part of the whole build, and now we're just waiting for the case. Whew, okay, so we are back. Team, this was the worst keyboard I've ever made. Since we did the script reading of all the parts we did, let me tell you something else we found out. We found out that the films of these Akko switches bowed the edges out just enough that it wouldn't fit on the plates. Not only did I have to lube and film all the switches, I then had to unfilm all the switches. And you can see here, I think the paint ended up being not too bad. The problem is, I mean, the paint obviously looks pretty rough. It looks pretty rough because of how we had to like use an orbital sander to scrape off a bunch of stuff. But I think this would look like, if we had just done the two-tone, this would have looked so good together. So I can see the bones of an incredible keyboard in here. Maybe I need to buy another one of these $10 ones to do it again. Now, normally I saved this part for the voiceover, but I'm kind of running out of time to get this done before it gets loud here again when my son gets home. We're gonna have to do the tape mod a little bit here, right on camera. Okay, that's probably as good as we're gonna get before we start having issues with the PCB, so let's start reassembling everything. And it's heartbreaking because look at how cool this looks like. I can see the bones of exactly what I was trying to do with this board, and it looks so good. It's just my inept paint job really kept this from just being so good. But it looks, I love the color combination. I think this looks really good together. All right, let's pop these switches in and see if we can't make it look exactly how I want. Hopefully it sounds like I want. All right, now it's time for the keycaps, and I think these are just gonna perfectly match what we're trying to do here. It's like the seafoam variant of a keyboard. Like if you live on the coast, this is the keyboard for you. Oh my goodness, I love how this turned out. I absolutely love how this keyboard turned out. It's the perfect, it's exactly how I wanted it to look. I think it looks fantastic. The keycaps feel great. They're nice and thick, like double thick keycaps. The color combination is perfect. The spray paint work needs some adjustment, but I would rather stumble being too ambitious than stumble just being boring. And I absolutely, this keyboard is phenomenal. Remember, this was a $10 just crappy blue switched gamer keyboard here a minute ago. As a reminder, this is how the keyboard sounded when it was straight out of the box without any upgrades. And this is what it sounds like now with our way too much upgrades in this roughly painted keyboard. Despite it being the toughest keyboard I've ever upgraded, I think it sounds great, I think it looks great, and I am very happy with how this turned out. And if you like this video and you would like to see what this keyboard looks like stock, you can find that video by clicking right here. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.